The record-breaking heat wave in the West has made international news, and Canada is not the only country suffering in the heat. Take a look at this map from the World Meteorological Organization. Much of the Northern Hemisphere is in the midst of an exceptional early hot summer. From North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, Eastern Europe, Iran, and the northwestern Indian subcontinent. Maximum daily temperatures exceeded 45 degrees in a number of places, reaching the 50s in the Sahara. To help understand what's happening, we've reached out to Canadian atmospheric scientist Katharine Hayhoe. She has authored over 100 research papers, written many climate reports, and she teaches at Texas Tech University. She's also the chief scientist for the Nature Conservancy. Katharine, thanks so much for joining us today. Can we start with some context? You have said that global temperatures are rising faster than at any time in the history of human civilization. Why should we look at this latest heat wave as more than just a single exceptional weather event?
Well, that is true. Global temperatures are rising, and temperatures in Canada are rising twice as fast as the rest of the world. We see this playing out in our monthly temperatures. We are already breaking high temperatures at the monthly scale 4 times more frequently than low temperature records. But we're also seeing it in how climate change is loading the weather dice against us. So we always have a chance of rolling a double six, a heat wave in the summer. But decade by decade, as the planet warms, it's sort of like it's sneaking in and taking one of those numbers on our dice and turning it into another 6, taking another number and turning it into a 7. And so we're rolling more 6s and even some 7s today as climate change fuels our natural summer weather patterns.
I want to ask you about something that you tweeted, I think last week. You said our entire civilization is built on the assumption that climate varies within bounds that can be predicted based on the past. You said it's as if we've been driving down the road looking in the rear view mirror, but now we've hit a dangerous curve and our wheels are teetering off the edge. It's a great analogy. Why has it taken so long to recognize the danger we're in?
We have assumed that we can depend on the past to tell us what the drought of record is, what the average summer or winter temperature is, where to draw the flood zones. We've built our civilization on that, not just for decades, but for centuries, even millennia. How and where we grow our crops, how we design and maintain our buildings and our infrastructure, even where our geographic boundaries are drawn, is based on the assumption of a stable climate. Yet today, climate is changing faster than any time that we humans have ever experienced in the course of civilization as we know it. And that's why we have to take our eyes off the rear view mirror. We have to look ahead into the future and incorporate information on the changes that are already unavoidable and inevitable into our planning, while at the same time doing everything we can to cut our carbon emissions as much as we can, as soon as we can, to avoid the very worst of the impacts.
Do you think that it's just the nature of human behavior that unless we endure something ourselves, like this heat wave in the West, we're not likely to take it seriously?
I think you're completely right. Because there's no debate over how much money we should be saving for retirement, how much exercise we should take every single day, exactly what we should or should not be eating. We all know the things that we're supposed to be doing. But until we get a wake-up call, often many of us are not doing them. Why? Because of something called psychological distance. We humans see risks as being far off. And with climate change, we see psychological distance in spades. If you ask people across North America, do you think climate is changing? Do you think it will affect plants and animals? So other species, not humans. Do you think it will affect people who live in low-income countries on the other side of the world? Do you think it will affect future generations? People say yes. But then you say, do you think it will affect you? And the numbers drop precipitously. We just don't see the immediacy of the impacts until we experience them ourselves.
And a lot of us don't want to change the way we're living either, because it's pretty comfortable for a lot of us. Katharine, multiple countries, including Canada, have declared climate emergencies. And as you say, more people seem to care about climate change in general now. Is that translating, though, fast enough into a willingness to take bold action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
It is translating into action, and that action is beginning to accelerate. Is it enough yet? Not yet. We haven't yet got enough international commitments to meet the Paris targets, but awareness is growing. As scientists, our only concern is we need to get this moving before it is too late to avoid the worst of the impacts.
Well, scientists have been ringing the alarm bell for a long time now. Do you think they're getting the messaging right?
We've known since the 1800s that digging up coal back then, and now oil and natural gas, are wrapping an extra blanket around the planet, causing it to warm. By 1965, scientists were sufficiently concerned about the impacts of a changing climate on our civilization and our society that they formally warned a US president, and that was Lyndon B. Johnson. So we scientists have been sounding the alarm for a long time. And I think what we got wrong was this. We just assumed if you tell people there's a risk, they'll fix it. But until people recognize, number one, what it means to everything I already care about here and now today, and number two, what we can do, what viable solutions look like, people remain paralyzed and unable to act. And so that's what we see changing today. Not the scientific message. It is still the same. It's real, it's us, it's serious, and the time to act is now. But we're starting to see people recognize that the impacts are real, they're here, they matter, and the solutions are also here and actionable today.
Yeah, I think I've read that you've said you think people need to be aware of the risks, of course, but also informed of the solutions.
Absolutely. Because imagine if somebody told you there's a terrible problem, but you have no idea what to do about it. You would just feel like going back to bed and pulling the blankets up over your head if you feel like there's an asteroid's going to hit the Earth, but you can't fix it. So we have to pair our information on risks, which are very real and very dangerous, with information on what real solutions look like. Everything from low-hanging solutions like increasing efficiency. Across North America, we waste over 60% of the energy we burn and over 40% of our food. Then we can accelerate the transition to clean energy. I actually live in Texas, where they get 22% of their electricity already from wind energy, and their solar production is increasing every year. And then we have to also invest in nature-based solutions, putting carbon back in the soil and the ecosystems, our forests and grasslands, where we want carbon, where it's good and it's healthy. Our forests could be a carbon sink again if we manage them properly. Our agriculture could even be a carbon sink. There are so many positive solutions that clean up our air and our water, that grow our economy, that provide jobs, and that cut carbon at the same time.
I know you've spoken a bit about Alberta and the Canadian context. Of course, this country is so reliant on natural resources, and Alberta in particular on fossil fuels. And there's that the difficulty of making the transition to a clean economy. What is your message on how to, find informed solutions on how to do that?
Mm-hmm. I'm encouraged by news like, for example, Warren Buffett decided to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in building the biggest wind farm in Canada in Alberta. But I also really appreciate the work of many who are invested in making sure that there is a just transition. So, for example, there's a great little organization called Iron Plus Earth that is all about retraining oil patch workers to work in the clean energy industry, recognizing that many people get their livelihoods from oil and gas and from natural resources in Canada, and it's a job to feed their families. And it's not that we can demonize everybody associated with that industry, because many of them are just trying to live. And so that's why it's so important to look at the concept of a just transition, to look at providing opportunities, providing jobs, providing retraining, providing the ability for people to continue to feed their families, while at the same time ensuring that we are doing everything we can to cut our carbon emissions, because climate change affects every single one of us. It does not matter if we live in Vancouver, Calgary, or Halifax. It does not matter what political party we vote for. It does not matter who we are or what we care about. When those wildfires get bigger, when those floods get more frequent, when those heat waves get more deadly, every single one of us suffers.
The next UN climate conference is in November in Glasgow. How much does it matter that we get things agreed to at that meeting? How much does it matter to our future?
Mm-hmm. The conference in Glasgow is the 26th Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. 26 meetings. When's the best time to agree to cut our carbon as much as possible? As soon as possible. So the more ambitious the targets that can be set, and the more realistic and actionable the choices and the announcements that can be made, the better.
Katharine Hayhoe, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.